What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some impressions of The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion here in 2024, with what will ultimately be my first older review of the year, that is to say a look back at older games, in addition to all the new stuff I'll be covering. Which, in this case, is a thinly veiled excuse for the fact that I just really wanted to play Oblivion, so I might as well make some content while I'm at it. That said, Oblivion is actually one of my favorite games of all time, but while I have played it on and off throughout the years, the last time I did a full playthrough of this game was almost 15 years ago, back when I was in high school, shortly after the game had released, a year or two give or take. So with this video, before the actual full review, I want to set the stage a little bit, talking about a few different things of course, and my memory of them, but also discussing things like mods, etc. Now, I'm going to play through this with no mods. I'm actually using the Steam release of the Game of the Year version, which has proven surprisingly stable. More so than I was expecting. I was expecting to have to install a few mods, as is the case with games that, are pushing 20 years old usually, but outside of a few crashes, I haven't had any problems, and as a review channel, when it comes to older games especially, I only go for mods that are required to get the game to run properly, as was the case with the Gothic series. Some of those games are so old and they just simply do not work on modern hardware unless you mod them. Which is not the case for Oblivion, at least with the Steam release. Outside of a few crashes, it's been actually a pretty good time. Even having things like 4K support, that is to say scaling up to a monitor that uses 4K, not literally in 4K obviously. That said, probably worth a mention that when it comes to mods, besides just getting the game to run better, a lot of people like to use a UI mod that cleans up Oblivion's kind of less than intuitive UI, though that's not something that bothers me personally. What is much more relevant are the mods that deal with the game's level scaling, which we'll get to in a minute, because while the game will run and everything, probably the most important thing to know about vanilla Oblivion, or that is to say the unmodded version of Oblivion, is that the leveling, and more specifically the level scaling system, is broken. And if you don't have an understanding of how it works, or if you don't mod the game, you can back yourself into a corner where it's possible to essentially not be able to kill anything, due to just how broken that scaling is. Now, outside of that, a lot of people like to mod Oblivion to make it look better, and fair enough, more power to you, but personally, I think the, let's call them unique looking NPCs, provide a certain amount of character to the game. And while I kind of weirdly find that somewhat charming these days in an odd way, it does bring me to a few other points that I think are worth mentioning in regards to a look back at this game, and that the towns and the amount of people walking around are simultaneously worse and better than I thought or remembered. You see, you go to a place like the Imperial City, which is supposed to be the capital of the Empire, and there's barely anybody walking around. Each district only has a handful of interior locations, and it's like, wow, this clearly was limited by the technology of its time. Then, however, you go to basically any of the other actual towns, and almost every single one of them is bigger and has more going on than even Skyrim does. And speaking of those towns, something I remember very fondly of Oblivion 4 is that it is probably the game with the single most memorable quests for me. Like every other quest in this game was unique or had something really cool going on. And you have all the faction-related quests, of course, which everybody remembers, like the several Dark Brotherhood quests that are really well done, but also just random quests you can pick up in town, where Spirits Have Lease is one of my favorites, the Shadow over Innsmouth-inspired one where you go to Hackdirt to save Dharma, or the quest to track down the Grave Robber in the Imperial City, and the list goes on. There's just tons of them, and they're really, really well done, and I think those hold up even all this time later that I've experienced so far. And while those individual quests and exploring the world has been a ton of fun in the early hours here at least, before I've gotten the Oblivion gates rolling, which I'm about to do at the time of this recording, something that very immediately pops up is the, again, just flat out broken leveling system of this game. I won't go fully into it simply for the sake of leaving it for the review, and it honestly involves a ton of math, and it's one of the places where the mods for this game are really appreciated, of course, but the problem can be divided up into two sections: the actual leveling up process, and then the level scaling of the world around you. Now, on the leveling side of things, the main problem is that it is counterintuitive. At the beginning of the game, you can either choose a class or make your own. Making a class, or picking one, has you dealing with major and minor skills. Major skills are required to level up. Every time you get 10 increases of your major skills, you then level up to the next level. Minor skills can be leveled freely, but contribute to attribute bonuses when you level up. Basically, all of your skills, whether major or minor, are dictated by an individual attribute, such as strength, intelligence, willpower, etc. In order to maximize your attribute increases on each level, you have to level up extremely carefully, because you can only increase 3 attributes per level. However, how much you increase that attribute is based on how you leveled up your skills for that level. And in order to get the maximum bonus, you need to level up a skill associated with an attribute up to 10 times, though it can be a mixture of multiple skills. You just need to hit that 10 increase limit in order to get a +5 bonus to that attribute when you level up. Now, the catch to this is, once you hit the 10th major skill level up, those attribute increases are set in stone, and anything after that contributes to your next level up. Which all basically means if you're not being careful, you can give yourself a really bad level up, where you only get like +1s or +2s to certain attributes. And this creates the ridiculous problem where taking major skills for things you actually want to use is generally a mistake. The major skills, you actually want to simply have skills that are easily controlled so you can level them up at the exact right time, once you've then used your minor skills to guarantee the attribute increases you need. And to highlight that problem, you can check out some of the base classes for this game that, because of the way they're built, actually make it impossible to achieve the maximum bonuses to attributes for the specific playstyle that they are trying to get across to you. For instance, if you take the Warrior preset class, it is literally impossible to get the maximum bonus to your strength and endurance, which are the attributes you want for that class. So because of things like that, playing this game casually can lead you to some really poorly made character builds. Ultimately, depending on your major skills exactly, your max level tends to be somewhere around the 40 to 50 range. Due to some workarounds, you can actually go higher than that. And while theoretically, because of that max level, you could still max out your attributes. So what's the problem here? Well, outside of just being a nonsense backwards system, the bigger problem comes in when you start talking about level scaling. You see, basically everything in Oblivion scales to your character's level. And while for a lot of enemies that's fine because the scaling is so minimal that you'll basically always be able to kill them easily. The issue, however, is that it is downright broken for some enemies who, once you get past a certain level, become basically impossible to kill. We're talking like thousands of health. And even with maximum attributes, etc., it's just not going to be feasible to kill them in any reasonable amount of time. Because of this, there are numerous workarounds to these systems, which are mostly down to what is called efficient leveling, before eventually just stopping your level ups altogether rather than continuing to level up, which is why you need control over when your major skills are leveled up. So in Oblivion, in order to level up, you have to go find a bed and rest. Some people will actually just play through the entire game at a very low level to prevent the scaling from happening at all, which can also help out in a variety of cases. However, items and things like that scale off your level at the same time. Some items, or unique items even, are scaled literally to your level. They'll have different stats based on when you pick them up. But the other thing is item drops. Some tiers of items like Daedric, etc. don't start dropping until you reach certain level thresholds, which means typically, what I like to do at least, is get a lot of efficient leveling done, that is to say attributes maxed and skills pretty much where you want them before you just stop leveling altogether. For me, this tends to be around the level 20 or so range, which gives me a little bit of leeway in terms of like not perfectly maximized levels, while still giving me access to the higher tiers of equipment. Now, technically, I think level scaling stops at like level 30 at a maximum, but most of that stuff sorts itself out by 20 to 25. And because at that point your attributes and things are maxed, which means you are at the end of the damage calculations possible, leveling up much beyond that is actually just making enemies stronger than you can ever be, which is nonsense. And easily the worst thing about the game looking back, and why a lot of people choose to just mod that out because it is genuinely a terrible system. So with all of that in mind, playing the original vanilla Oblivion here, what am I actually doing in terms of level up? So I'd like to end this video talking about a little bit of what I have planned. Basically, I'm going to play an unarmed build just because I have not done that for Oblivion, I think ever actually, and hand-to-hand combat in Oblivion is a lot of fun, especially when you combine it with things like sneak. So basically I'm going to run a heavily armored Khajiit who punches things to death while occasionally doing some sneaking at the same time. I'm going to be doing a bit of efficient leveling at the beginning of the game, basically just getting my necessary attributes maxed out before stopping leveling around level 20, at which point I'm going to blitz out all of the content I want to see, including all of the DLC, the main story, etc., before wrapping it up and calling it a review. And while that might normally take some people quite some time, this is a game I'm very familiar with, so I'd honestly be surprised if it takes me more than a week. My current goal is to have this knocked out by next weekend, like the 12th or the 13th of January, but we shall see. And in that review, I'll go into all the details, explain my thoughts on various factions, quests, how it's held up, how it compares to some of my memories of these things. But my initial thoughts, having just jumped into it again, are that the quests so far have held up surprisingly well. The level scaling is as annoying as I remember it being, though I have to admit it's a huge hit of nostalgia running through some of these old towns that I remember, or going through a dungeon where I suddenly remembered that this is where I used to grind out my sneak skill because of the ability to max the experience for it, that kind of thing. So that's been a huge rush for me, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into the Daedric Shrine quests, while hopefully having a few good laughs about how terribly this game that I love so much has aged. But that is going to do it for this video. I hope you're looking forward to the full review for this one, which is just one of a handful of things I have planned for this January, but that is going to do it for today. So I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.